Hey kids, welcome to factoring day 2, where today we are going to learn how to factor a trinomial with a equal to 1 and learn how to factor a polynomial by grouping. All right, the next type of factoring, remember we talked about greatest common factor and we talked about difference of two squares in the last video. Today we're going to learn how to factor a trinomial with a equals 1. So a trinomial is a polynomial that has 3 terms, so it's going to look something like up here in the pink box, ax squared plus bx plus c. Today we are going to pretend like the a is a 1, and so it's going to just look similar to this, although there may be some GCF still hanging about. But our main focus today is learning how to factor a trinomial with a 1 in front. Now, in order to do that, we are going to try to find two numbers that add to get whatever that b value is and multiply to get whatever that c value is. So adds to get b, multiplies to get c, and the a value for right now is going to be a 1. In the next video, it's not. So factor each completely, if not factorable, right prime. So what you're going to do, p squared plus 2p minus 8. So what we want to do is we want to find two numbers that add to give me 2 and multiply to get negative 8. So adds to get 2, multiplies to get negative 8. So try to think of two numbers. For instance, 4 and negative 2. So if I multiply 4 times negative 2, you get negative 8. If you add 4 and negative 2, you get 2. So I always try to think of numbers first that multiply and then see if I can get that to do the addition. Now, once you have those two numbers, you're going to take two parentheses and you're going to put the letter from the problem in the beginning of the parentheses. And then you're going to put one number in the first parenthesis, positive 4, and one number in the second parenthesis, negative 2. And that's your answer. Now you might be saying, wow, is that really true? Well, guess what? I'm going to check it for you. You don't have to check them, but if you ever want to, like on a test or a quiz, you can totally check them by double distributing. So p times p is p squared. And then p times negative 2 is negative 2p. And 4 times p is 4p. And 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. And then if I collect like terms in the middle, negative 2p plus 4p is plus 2p. Bring down the minus 8. Look, when we check it, we get the original problem. Crazy. So whatever the two numbers are that add and multiply to get the problem are the numbers in the answer. And again, it doesn't matter if the first parenthesis is p minus 2 and the second one is p plus 4. As long as the positive is with the 4 and the negative is with the 2, that's fine. If the signs are with the wrong number, then that's a completely different problem. So be very careful with your signs. All right, if we look at letter B, p squared minus 4p minus 5. So again, I need to think of two numbers that add to give me negative 4 and multiply to get me negative 5. So think about numbers that multiply to get 5. Well, it's only 1 and 5. But since they multiply to get a negative 5, that means the signs have to be different. The bigger sign is negative, so negative 5 and 1. So negative 5 plus 1 is negative 4, and negative 5 times 1 is negative 5. So I start my two parentheses, and I put the letter in the problem in the parentheses, and I put one of the numbers, negative 5, in the first parenthesis, and the second number, plus 1, in the second one. Again, doesn't matter the order. All right, letter C, 6x squared minus 6x minus 72. First of all, notice that there is a coefficient in front of the squared term. Well, guess what, kids? Always look for GCF first because there is a 6 in common. If I take a 6 out, I'm left with x squared minus x minus 12. Once I do that, I want to take a look at the parenthesis and see if I can keep going, because sometimes all you can do is take a 6 out and you're done. We saw that in the previous video. But now I can take a 6 out and keep going because I can find two numbers that add to get -1 and multiply to get -12. So think about things that multiply to get -12. How about like 4 and 3? And if you make it -4 and a +3, then when you add them, you get a -1. So don't forget that 6. It goes along for the ride. Start your two empty parentheses. Letter in the problem is the letter in the parentheses, so put your X's. And then your two numbers are -4 and +3. There you go. All right, take a look at letter D, -4x squared minus 28x minus 40. First of all, notice that the first thing is a negative, so my greatest common factor has got to include a negative. And also notice that each of the numbers are divisible by 4. So I'm going to factor a -4 out. That's going to leave me with x squared plus 7x plus 10. Be very careful with your signs, especially when you factor negatives out, because that changes all the signs in the rest of the problem. Now I want to try to find two numbers that add to get 7 and multiply to get 10. It's really nice when both of the symbols in the trinomial are positive because you don't have to mess with any negative numbers in subtraction. So two numbers that add to get 7, multiply to get 10 would be 2 and 5. So I'm going to let that -4 come down for the ride, start my two empty parentheses, put my x at the start of each one, and then my numbers are +2 and +5. Doesn't matter which one goes in which parenthesis. All right, so that's the third type of factoring. Fourth type of factoring is called factor by grouping. So factor by grouping needs at least 4 terms. So once you see, if you look at these problems, notice that each of them now has 4 terms. So you cannot do this method unless you have 4 terms. And what factor by grouping does is it takes a group of 4 terms and it basically splits it in half. And what you're going to do is you're going to find a GCF of one side and you're going to find a GCF on the other side, and magic is going to happen. And you'll combine like terms. So let's see what I mean by that. Same directions. Factor completely. If not factorable, write prime. So first thing, count all the terms. 1, 2, 3, 4. I see 4 terms, so chop it in half. And then what you're going to do is you're going to find the GCF in the first 2 terms. So between 21 and -7, I can take a 7 out. And then notice x cubed and x squared, they both have an x squared in common. And then you put what's left after you take that out. So I have a 3x and a -1 left over. So all I've done is taken the first 2 terms and I've factored a GCF of 7x squared, and I was left with 3x minus 1. Then you ignore that first half that you did and you look at the second half and you take a GCF out here. Let's see, the GCF, since it's a negative symbol in the middle, that means you want to take a negative as a GCF out. And so between 9 and 3, you can take a 3 out. And what's left would be 3x, and watch your sign, -1. Now, if you do factor by grouping correctly, the stuff in the parentheses should be exactly the same. If it's not, then you did it wrong, and you need to go back and fix it. So, after you've established that the stuff in the parentheses is the same thing, you take the stuff in front, 7x squared, and the -3, and you put it together in its own parenthesis. Then you take the stuff that is repeated, and you write it one time. So I've got 7x squared minus 3 in the first parenthesis, and 3x minus 1 in the second. Again, you can check these as well by double distributing, and if you double distribute correctly, you won't be able to collect the middle term, and that's why there's 4 terms left over instead of 3 like on the previous page. All right, let's take a look at letter B. 2a cubed plus 16a squared minus 6a minus 48. All right, so chop it in half. Take a look at the GCF of the first 2 terms. So 2 and 16 has a 2 in common. A cubed, a squared has an a squared in common. Then you write what's left. So you are going to have an a plus 8 left. Then you're going to take a look at the second half. Notice the middle symbol's a negative, so you're factoring a negative number out. Between 6 and 48, there's a 6 in common, and you're left with a plus 8. Again, when you're factoring negative out, the sign changes. Notice that the stuff in the parentheses is exactly the same, so you're going to group it together, 2a squared minus 6 and a plus 8. However, this time, notice that in this first parenthesis, 2a squared minus 6, there is a GCF still, which means I could have taken a GCF out at the very beginning as well. But in a parenthesis, you can never have a GCF left over. So I'm going to take a 2 out of this first parenthesis, and I'm left with a squared minus 3. But I don't do anything with the second parenthesis because I wasn't factoring a GCF out. Now I'm done. Always be on the lookout for those GCFs. They're sneaky. All right, letter C. Let's chop it in half. All right, GCF in the first two terms is 35, can divide into 210. So 35, and there's an x squared in common. That's going to leave me with x minus, and 210 divided by 35 is 6. Then notice that middle symbol is negative, so let's take a negative out. 21 does go into 126 6 times, so I can take a 21 out, and that leaves me with x minus 6. Remember, if the two things in the parentheses are not the same, then you did it wrong. Then gather the stuff in front, 35x squared minus 21, and write one of the x minus 6's. Peek and see if there's any GCFs. Ooh, there still is a GCF. I can take a 7 out of 35 and 21, so I'm going to factor a 7 out. That leaves me with 5x squared minus 3 left, and x minus 6. Notice directions say to factor completely. If all you did was stop at step 2, that's factoring, but you didn't factor completely. Okay, last one, split it in half. GCF in the first two terms is going to be a 2 and an x squared. That's going to leave you with a 4x plus 7. Then nice, that middle sign is a plus, so I'm going to factor a plus value out, or a positive. Between 12 and 21, you can factor a 3 out. That's going to leave you with 4x plus 7. Nice, the stuff in the parentheses is the same. Gather it together, 2x squared plus 3 and 4x plus 7. Check and see if there's any GCFs in your parentheses. There aren't, so you're good to go. Again, remember you can double distribute these out to check if you're on a test or a quiz or you're just curious, lost the answer sheet. All right, let's take a look. This one mixes together the two we just did. Factor by grouping and the adds and multiplies method. If you notice, once you see 4 terms, you should be thinking factor by grouping. If you see less than 4 terms, you should be thinking adds and multiplies. So in this first letter A, it's got 4 terms, so let's factor by grouping. We can take a 15 out and a v cubed, and then that's going to leave us with 8v minus 1. Remember, you always have to have 2 things if you're distributing to get 2 things. Middle symbol's a plus, so I'm going to put a plus. I can take a GCF of 5v out. That's going to leave me with 8v minus 1. Again, stuff in the parentheses has to be the same. It is, so smush it together, 15v cubed plus 5v. And then put one of the 8v minus 1s. Look for any GCFs. Ooh, I see a number and a letter GCF here. I see a 5 and a v. That's going to leave me with 3v squared plus 1 and 8v minus 1. If you're going to double distribute this one out, I would recommend double distributing the two binomials first, getting an answer, and then distributing the 5v to everything. That would be easier. All right, letter B, I see 4 terms, chop it in half. So in the first 2 terms, we can actually divide both of these by 14. So we're going to put 14n squared. And 56 divided by 14 is 4n. And then 98 divided by 14 is a 7. So 4n minus 7. Then between 64 and 112, you can divide by 16. And you're left with 4n minus 7. Stuff in the parentheses is the same, so 14n squared plus 16 and 4n minus 7. But there is a GCF in the first term, or in the first binomial, you can factor a 2 out, and that leaves you with 7n squared plus 8 with 4n minus 7. So kids, always be on the lookout for GCFs. All right, letter C. I see 3 terms, so we're not going to factor by grouping. 6k squared plus 6k minus 12. I see a GCF, so I'm going to factor a 6 out. And that's going to leave me with k squared plus k minus 2. And then I see a trinomial inside of my parentheses, so I'm going to think about, can I add to get 1 and multiply to get negative 2? Remember, there's a 1 in front of the k. So let's see, that's going to be a 2 and a negative 1. So I'm going to bring the 6 along. I'm going to do my 2 empty parentheses. I'm going to put my k at the beginning of each one. My numbers are 2 and negative 1, so plus 2 and minus 1. Again, doesn't matter if you put the minus 1 first or the plus 2. All right, letter D, 4a squared plus 36a plus 56. I see everything divisible by 4. So that's going to leave me with a squared plus 9a plus 14. I see a trinomial inside with a 1 in front. That's good. So I'm going to try to find 2 numbers that add to give me 9 and multiply to give me 14. Both of them are positive, which is really nice. So let's see, 2 and 7. So bring the 4 along for the ride. Do your 2 empty parentheses. Put an a at the beginning of each one. Your numbers are positive 2 and positive 7. Don't forget the 4. All right, kids, that is the end of factoring day 2. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. And as always, keep calm and keep trucking.